The story of Canadians beginning and ending 2 weeks in quarantine. As you look at these pictures, evacuees from the Diamond Princess cruise ship in Japan arriving in Cornwall, Ontario just earlier this morning and embarking now on another 14 days of quarantine. These are some of the first arrivals as we have captured them in Cornwall. The Diamond Princess, as you've been telling you, it's the location for the world's biggest cluster of coronavirus cases outside mainland China, more than 600. We know that about 130 Canadian passengers were cleared for Ottawa's emergency airlift yesterday after they spent 15 days virtually confined in their cabins on board. So that evacuation flight arrived at home early this morning, just after 2 o'clock local time, and our cameras were there in CFB Trenton as the plane landed. Trenton's about 3 hours away from the NAV Centre, the facility where the passengers are and where they are beginning their quarantine. Our Matthew Kupfer is just outside for us this morning.
As they come in, you can see that the driver is wearing a face mask. The passengers that you can see are wearing face masks. And then they unload right up there. What you're seeing is the second bus where patients have been unloading nearly one by one. There has been health workers on site in smocks wearing masks. Some of them have also come down to start the disinfection or the cleaning at least of the first bus that arrived. That was right behind me when we started talking. So here in Cornwall, it's been a pretty active situation. There are a lot of health officials on site. About 129 Canadians is what we're being told by Public Health Agency of Canada. 129 Canadians from the Diamond Princess are coming to Cornwall, to the NAV Centre here for 14 days of quarantine.
So yes, those 14 days, I mean, this is kind of a daunting prospect. They've already been on their ship and essentially confined to quarters, Matthew, for already 2 weeks, but another quarantine awaits. What do we know about what they're going to go through and what they're going to experience during the quarantine to come?
So they were checked at CFB Trenton. That was another screening where they checked their throats, checked for temperature, checked for symptoms of coronavirus. They will be getting another check today, but they are being given a chance to rest a little bit. They'll get to eat. And then it'll be 2 checks a day from health officials on site to make sure that they're not presenting symptoms of coronavirus during this quarantine. They will be allowed outside. There's a fenced area with some blackout material where they'll be able to go out during specified times, not supposed to interact too much with each other. So otherwise they're staying in kind of hotel-like accommodations is how it's been described, though it isn't the main hotel part of the NAV Centre, which of course, as well as being a training center, it's a hotel and conference center.
That's Matthew Kupfer, who's in Cornwall, Ontario. We're going to be watching the Cornwall story and bring you updates on the evacuees as they continue to arrive and be processed and begin their quarantine. They've been in touch with us, telling us how they feel as they start that next phase of the recovery, if you will. But even as that quarantine begins, we're also watching the stories of more than 200 Canadian evacuees who are coming to the end of their time in quarantine. They came out of Wuhan, China, the very epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, and they are now being released. The first group going home today. So let's take you next live to Trenton, where our Megan Fitzpatrick is just outside CFB Trenton, and the buses are leaving, the passengers are leaving. What have you been seeing this morning there, Megan?
Well, Heather, we know they were up bright and early this morning as well to get ready for their departures from their homes for the last 2 weeks. They're small rooms in a hotel-like facility called the Yukon Lodge, and then another second building as well is where these Canadians were housed since arriving from Wuhan 2 weeks ago. We know they were fed some breakfast. We're told by some of the passengers that it was hard-boiled eggs and a plain bagel. And then they departed, loading up on those buses buses. Some of those people have sent us photos of what the buses looked like as they left the buildings and got on those buses that are now headed to Toronto, to Pearson Airport, Terminal 1. That's where they will be dropped off, and essentially they're on their own from there. So it was up to the individuals to book onward flights from there to go back to wherever they wanted to go in Canada, or to arrange local transport at Pearson. So a couple of bus loads of people leaving from Trenton here. But the other option too, Heather, was for people to get picked up here at CFB Trenton by family members, if that was easier for them or preferable. So we know that could be happening for some of these passengers as well, but that won't be until around noon, and those arrangements had to be made in advance. Those people coming to pick those up, giving their names to the security people at the base, obviously, to be allowed in to pick up their loved ones. So no doubt there will be some happy reunions here at CFB Trenton a few hours from now.
You mentioned, Megan, that we're getting pictures from some of the Canadians, and we're getting little anecdotes too, texting with them and emailing with them, because we've gotten to know them over their time in China and then their time in quarantine. And really, what's your sense of their feeling as they finally get to go home today?
Well, we're actually hearing some mixed feelings, Heather, I'd say. Relief, also mixed with anxiety for some of these people, including people like Patterson Wu, who we've been in touch with. He's telling us that he's excited to go home from here to Vancouver, but his partner is still back in Wuhan. So saying that that's stressful. And, you know, they've been apart. They're in touch every day by phone, but he's worried about her back in Wuhan. He had been over there visiting her family when this all started. Other people we're hearing from include Michael Schellenberg, who tells us he is feeling fantastic and that he can't wait to have some real food in his view. And over the last few days, we've been talking to some people we've been talking to throughout this, like Megan Millward and her husband and their 2 young children from Montreal. They talked to us about what life was like under quarantine the last 14 days, saying they kept themselves busy. We know they were allowed outside, they were allowed to get fresh air, there was a playground for the children, there were coloring books, and to that end, we know some of the kids that were under quarantine here were quite the artists. They had been keeping themselves busy with drawings, and a lot of those drawings showed their gratitude to the Red Cross volunteers, Heather, who have been working here, taking care of them, and we know some of these Canadians did quite a bit of fundraising for the Red Cross as a way to thank them for their care over the last 14 days. So this is the first batch of the evacuees from Wuhan that are leaving today. A second plane came in a few days later. Those people will be leaving Trenton sometime early next week.
Megan, thank you very much. You may very well find yourself there on Tuesday again, reporting for us on this story, as you have throughout our Megan Fitzpatrick outside CFB Trenton. Megan mentioned the passengers to whom we've been speaking and with whom we've been in frequent contact, one of whom is Carter Perrier. Want to show you this. He sent us in just moments ago his own picture as he got set to get on that bus, leaving the quarantine at Yukon Lodge, getting on the bus. And then he sent us this. It's worth taking a good close look at, because when they leave, this is one of the things they're carrying with them. The official authorization letter allowing them to leave a quarantine facility. And you can see it's quite formal. I'm just going to read it to you because the print is small. But pursuant to subsection 65, subsection 2 of the Quarantine Act, I hereby authorize you to leave the quarantine facility at Canadian Forces Base Trenton. And goes on to say that he has fulfilled the requirements of the minimizing the risk of exposure to COVID-19 acute respiratory disease in Canada order by remaining at the quarantine facility at CFB Trenton until the expiry of the 14-day period that began on the date of your arrival at the base. And also saying there's been no other public health reason identified that would necessitate your further stay within the quarantine facility, signed officially by a quarantine officer. So all of the people who are leaving today having a letter similar to what Carter Perrier has and has shared with us this morning.